Hello, good evening, and welcome to the AI Argument with myself, Justin Collery, and joined as always with Frank Prendergast. Frank, good evening and welcome. It's been the week that the robots have taken over. How's your week been?
It's been a reasonable week, apart from the rise of the robots. Robots have been all over my feed, and one of the things that everyone has been talking about ever since the whole AI revolution has been happening is the rise of the machines, and are we headed towards a Terminator style ending here? And I gotta say, reading all these different news articles and putting them all together, I am inclined to say yes. Yes, we are headed towards, the only bit of the puzzle that's missing so far is the time travel. Apart from that, as we'll see in a minute, we've got all the component parts to put all this together. We just need the time travel. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm sure Elon Musk is working on that somewhere in some basement in one of his projects, right?
Sure, he is. Well, he's got to be. He's got to be somewhere. Well, look, before we get to the time travel and before we get to annihilation and the robots taking over, we're all going to have nice cars. So look on the bright side. So one of the stories that caught my eye this week is BMW are automating one of their factories with figure robots. Did you see this? So they now have these robots, which are humanoid robots, and they have them, and they're just about assembling cars. And
Yeah.
what was striking about this particular story was there were two things for me. One is how the robots were trained, and two was the accuracy of the robots. So the robots were
Mm.
trained from videos. So they just watched videos of human operatives and what they did, and then they were able to learn. The figure robots were able to learn from the movements of the people, and they were able to place parts to, I believe it was within 1 centimeter of accuracy, which is incredibly good. This was very tight work, and they were able to self-correct so that they could put a piece of metal down and they could move it and whatever. Now they looked very slow to me, Frank. I mean, to be honest with you, if there was a horde of them coming to kill me, I mean, I'm not the fastest runner in the world, but I wouldn't be under any fear that I'm not getting out of there. So they don't fill me with worry.
Yeah, and I saw some discussion about that actually, about how slow they were. But I guess, as somebody else pointed out, yeah, they might be slow, but they can work 24/7, so they can make
Yeah,
up for the lost time. Which I
they're
don't,
kind of like a zombie workforce. They're kind of slow but methodical.
yeah, and they just keep coming at you. Yeah, so you
They
can keep
do.
running, but you'll eventually get tired, and they're going to keep coming. So don't, when you're taking your breather.
Look, it's fine, it's fine. But it's interesting that this has been put forward by BMW and Figure, but I'm quite sure that Tesla are way ahead of the game here in terms of automation. I mean, I think Elon Musk said years ago that the hard part about building cars wasn't the designing the cars and stuff like that, but it was the supply chain, and it was setting up factories and automating the factories and
Mm.
stuff like that. So I think that this is something that's very important, that's happening in the future. And I think one of the things that you worry about and I look forward to is, that robots are going to do a lot of work in the future, right? And I would think about it in terms of cognitive work, which is work that you do, but also factory work. And one of the
Yeah.
other stats I saw this was that Amazon hire in inverted commas more robots than people now.
Yeah, I mean, so we had the figure robot, and
Hmm.
they've released video of it, and like the leap from when we first started talking about figure, like what was that first task we saw it do when we talked about it ages ago? Was it making coffee, maybe?
I'd say it wasn't even making coffee. Well, there was one video where it made coffee, and there was another video where it was cleaning some rubbish up off a.
Yeah.
That was the one
So
they
it's
did with
gone it's
OpenAI.
gone from that to now having like an actual job. So like BMW have actually signed a contract where it's actually going to do this work. That's a massive leap. Then we have the story, as you say, about Amazon hiring that many robots, and basically the cost of robots coming down so much that that it makes economical sense to do that. And then you also had the other robot, which I'm trying to remember the name of, a Digit robot. And that is another robot that has also actually now been given a job in an industry where it's working in fulfillment warehouses. they've already got these autonomous robots that, you know, just look like trolleys. So they've got these, I think that there's a name for them, which I've forgotten, like coballs or something. I can't remember. But they're these trolleys, robot trolleys that move things from one place to another. And normally humans, you know, take the containers off these robot trolleys and put them on a conveyor belt. And now Digit have this humanoid robot, like the figure robot, which is doing this task of picking up the thing and putting it in the right place, again with, you know, incredible accuracy, not necessarily massive speed, but obviously it can lift a lot more than a human, and it can again work 24/7. So you've got, like, we just seem to be making these massive leaps in robotics, and I'm okay with it. I have the same fear around this as I do with AI, which is I'm okay with them doing the work as long as the people who are displaced are looked after. Like that's my big concern in all of this, that we look after the people. And I don't know what's happening right now. Now, obviously, the PR is around, well, this is absolutely about looking after people because nobody has to lift that weight anymore. Nobody has to put their back out lifting these containers. And that's a lovely story, but are those people still employed? Are those people being paid the same? Are there less people being employed? What's going on? I don't know. And that's what we have to look out for.
I don't think we come to, I think that's super important, by the way, that point there. I think that's a super important point. I mean, I worry that what's happening here is that story, the one about, and I couldn't actually find a proper attribution for that story, right? Where there was hard numbers, but this one where Amazon hire more robots than people. And I do worry that the way that this happens, I totally agree with you. We have to look after the people. And I don't think that society, I don't think that companies, I don't think that big corporates have got their hands anywhere near around this problem. They haven't got around this problem at all yet. And it may be that we're in the phase where it's not that people are going to lose their jobs, but people just don't get hired. And that has a disproportionately bad effect on younger people or people that are entering the workforce, because they're the people that would do these types of jobs, and therefore they don't get any jobs. So that's an issue. I'm with you on that one. I agree.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, we've all heard the horror stories of some of those Amazon warehouses. They are not pleasant places to work. So, you know, having robots do really unpleasant jobs, it makes perfect sense as long as we look after the people, for sure. But then we move into the whole other next realm of robotics that has been taken over my newsfeed, which is, you know, we have the one where we talked, again, a couple of episodes, we talked about the fact that there were scientists were using stem cells to create brain-like organisms that functioned as computers. And now I see a story in my timeline about a humanoid robot powered by one of these brain-like organisms, and the robot has learned how to move its arms. Apparently, that's what the story was about. That it has now learned how to autonomously move its arms using this brain-like organism, which is very, very similar to a human brain. So
it's called science, Frank. Science in it. You know, they made a movie from this years ago. It was black and white. It's alive. What was that again? Yeah. Frankenstein, Frank. I think that's what it was called. Yeah, it was Frankenstein.
and then we move into, like, now, you know, we're getting closer and closer and closer to Terminator. But here's the one that really gives us a huge leap forward towards Terminator.
The next story you're going to go to, there is a particular quote I want to talk about, but let's just go back to that one for a second, right? So we have Elon Musk at the moment, and he's got Neuralink. And so it's okay for us to take a brain and put a computer into the brain, but it's not okay to take the computer and put a brain into the computer. I mean, I can see that it's quite obviously it's research which is done in China, because you probably wouldn't have a hope of getting it past any sort of an ethics board in the Western world. But maybe just, you know, I'm all for progress, and sometimes people like me can be blinded to the ethics of a situation, you know, just because you can do it. Yes, you should, you know, but oftentimes,
yeah,
oftentimes I could be wrong. And
I'm not necessarily saying we shouldn't, actually, which I know might surprise you, but yeah, I'm not necessarily saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying it's freaky.
It's
I mean, and how quickly, how quickly do we go from it moving its arms, learning how to move its arms, to learning how to kill us all?
You see, I don't. I take a different view, which is how quickly does it go from growing brain cells to make arms move in a robot to growing brain cells to make arms move in a stroke victim, right? Or growing brain cells to make people talk that had a stroke or that had a brain injury. It's technology, which I agree when you look at it. And the next quote is just brilliant, but there is positive benefits to these what appear to be quite out there experiments. So I'm all for the science, so long as they don't. Where I would find a line is they have this law that they're bringing in California. They've done it in Europe too, where if you're training an AI model and it takes us more than a certain amount to compute, you have to be properly regulated by the government. And I've got problems maybe with that law, but anyway, that's the laws that they're proposing. I do think that in this instance, you should have a law which says, well, if you're doing this sort of brain research and you're growing the brains, well, then the brains, they can't get bigger than, and it has to be pretty small, because you don't know what you're creating there. And for sure, you could be creating something which feels pain or which feels suffering or whatever. I mean, you were literally growing a brain in a petri dish. So there's positive stuff that can come out of it, as I say, for people with brain injuries, but there's also negatives. And that would, kind of weird. It needs to be regulated. Take me on to your next story, Frank. Let me do the quote.
So the next story is the one that brings us in horrifying leaps and bounds closer to a Terminator type situation, because it is robots with covered in living tissue. So basically robots with skin that is very similar to human skin. Why? I think one of the reasons is that it can self-repair. So I think it's like a protective layer that can self-repair. I think that's the main reason why.
I like
it. Also, they one of the experiments they did was to see could they give a robot this living skin, and then could they make the robot smile? So I think that's another, that's another why is the expressiveness that it might be able to bring, that robots would be able to, express emotions that we would recognize more easily.
I'm guessing this was done in a research lab, again, somewhere in the Far East, and not in Cambridge or Dublin.
I'm not sure where it occurred. We'll have to look that up. What was the quote you liked from that piece?
I got very troubled with the opening line from this particular article, which was, have you ever wondered what it might look like if a robot ripped off your face, carefully smothered it onto its unfeeling exoskeleton, and then looked back at you with bone-chilling smiles that made you wonder how humanity had strayed so far from all that is good and right? Well, wonder no longer. I can't read anymore.
I have, yes. I've often wondered that. Surely you've wondered that often as well, Justin.
Never. I have happy thoughts, Frank. These are not happy thoughts. But all of this, I have to say, there's a famous economist called Nassim Taleb, and he was talking about the travails of France. I love France, by the way. He was talking about the travails of France, and for other political reasons and stuff like that. But I think actually it's absolutely applicable to what we're about to go through in terms of AI and the robotics revolution in terms of production, because France essentially is a production powerhouse. But anyway, his quote this week, and I love it, was France, the unsustainable and unavoidable mutation of a standard industrial welfare state into a low-growth, high-date museum welfare state with a medieval economy focused on handbags, cheese, and wine. And I thought it was a great quote, and it's funny, right? But it's funny because also it's going to be true, because anything they make is going to be made by robots in the near future. And so they will only have, cheese, wine, and handbags. And even the handbags will probably be made by robots too.
So are you saying the rise of the robots is going to relegate humankind to a kind of a medieval museum piece that the robots maybe come and have a look at, see the history of the world, but that's about it?
Well, God, I tell you, I remember, I don't know, those are Nassim Taleb's words. I wouldn't see it as a medieval economy. I see it as a post-scarcity economy. But I mean, to give you an idea, I mean, maybe we'll be the museum pieces, as you say. Maybe the robots will come and visit us in our little homes and, see what we look like. I mean, I do remember a couple of years ago watching the BBC News, and at the end of the news, they have this sort of nice, sort of fluffy segment. And it was like, and today the pupils from Durham's elementary school went to the Museum for Computing, where they saw a BBC microcomputer. I learned to program on a BBC microcomputer. What the hell is it doing in a museum? Jesus Christ. I was shocked. So that's it. We're next up to go to the museum, Frank. But look at there's quite a series. So I can certainly see that industrialization 2.0 is going to be robotics. That seems to be clear. I think that there's a lot of social good in, I'm sure Amazon are interested in robots because they don't have to take toilet breaks and all that sort of stuff. There's a social good where, robots can work 24/7 and you'll get your beard trimmer, in 24 hours. And that's all great. But there's a darker side to all of this, right? And there's an economically darker side, which is there's an awful lot of these companies, right, selling these robotic stuff. And I do worry that, there's a bubble, or, how do you know? It seems to be an awful lot of them. But the second side of that is there's a very dark side to robotics, which is war, right? And we have in the Ukraine now an existential war, which is going on. And you have, a very wealthy adversary fighting a much smaller and poorer adversary. And they will use the same technology. This is a general purpose technology. And therefore, they will use this technology for survival. And that perhaps can take us to places that aren't as entertaining and not as, fluffy as the other places, but it's reality too. And you have to acknowledge that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, this is terrifying and just horrifying to think about. But the Ukraine are now basically using technology that's available, consumer technology. So they're combining AI technology with things like drones and Raspberry Pis, and they are basically building their own autonomous weapons. They are building drones that are able to identify enemy tanks and automatically smash into them with explosives. So very little human input required. They're modifying like PlayStation controllers and with tablets to be able to control these drones. And I think they even were able to build like an autonomous kind of machine gun type thing.
Yep.
And this is terrifying and horrifying. And I know that, there's probably, I don't know much about the, the rules or the whatever that govern war. I know that the United Nations are concerned about this, but I'm assuming that like all of this is so new that there's probably nothing that governs these uses. And Ukraine are saying, well, we're like you said, it's an existential war. They're saying we're fighting for our very existence, and we are going to use whatever tools we have available. And we are up against an enemy with far greater manpower. So we need to figure out, how we can even the balance a little bit. And that's how they're doing it is with building their own autonomous weapons. And I get it. I don't know how, war is just horrific. I don't even like thinking about this. But what does strike me as well is that, when you look at it through this lens, in these circumstances, I can understand why you would do this. It makes perfect sense. I'm sure if I was in that situation, I would be doing everything I could to do that, to use AI to gain an advantage over my enemy. What also concerns me, though, is that, these are consumer products that are available to anybody. Like, what other bad actors are out there who are not necessarily under existential threat, who could be possibly using these technologies, or what could they be using them for? It's a whole can of worms that just doesn't bear thinking about, really.
I think that's a really good point, actually, that one. And I think that's the core of the argument against open source, powerful AI models. Exactly the argument that you've made there. So, I mean, if just to on the existential survival risk for the Ukraine, I mean, I would make the argument that fighting the wars with drones is better, preferable than a traditional war. So, what would you prefer me to do? Would you like me to, lay 1 million landmines and just leave them sit there for the next 10 years and have people walk on them? And there's no human in the loop there, right? Would you like me to launch millions of scatter bombs and cluster bombs and have kids pick them up 5 years from now? I mean, there's no human in the loop there either, right? Or would you like me to have, 100,000 drones whose battery lasts for maybe half an hour or an hour? It goes and finds its target. It's not indiscriminate. It's very targeted as to what it's targeting. That seems to me to be a better way to
Well,
fight a war than to have a sort of a random type of a way of doing it. So I'm good with that. And I have a view that in the future, I mean, what I would like to see, and this is my positive view, is that wars get fought from the top down rather than the bottom up. So at the moment, Russia and the Ukraine just throw, it's a meat grinder, and they throw person after person, and it's just horrible, right? I would much prefer to have an army of drones and just say, Mr. Putin or Mr. Zelensky or whoever my enemy is, take whatever side, I'll take none. Well, of course I do, right? It's the Ukraine, but pick another war. That you just say, I'm going to go for the leader. And then, so there's going to be no casualties except for one, and it's going to be you, right? So back off and you do this. So that's but then I take your argument, right? How do you put that positive thing to a bad purpose? And that's where you get into sticky waters. I don't know how you stop that with open source models.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you know what, this is a horrendous topic. I think we should see what have we got that we can leave this topic behind and talk about something a little bit lighter or a little bit more fun.
Let's think about, okay, instead of people fighting people, Frank, how about models fighting models? So we had this week, we had this, who was it? It was a famous comedian, and they were roasted. They got Sonnet 3.5 to roast GPT 4.40, and they used a full pipeline to do it. They created a video, and the video was brilliant. The jokes were terrible. It was Dave Chappelle. They got Dave Chappelle to virtually roast GPT 4.0, but actually the voice was Eleven's Labs, and the material was created by Claude 3.5, and actually was quite entertaining.
And and so this is a new tool that's coming on the market apparently. So like I will be able to feed this tool details about you, and then have Dave Chappelle or I've forgotten his name, the guy from the Office, Ricky Gervais. I'll be able to have one of these celebrity comedians roast you and like send you the video. I wasn't able to try it out because it's still in invite only, but I think they're very close to rolling it out. What did you think? I was surprised because I started watching it and I thought, okay, this is just terrible and it's not funny. But as it went on, there was a couple of moments in there that weren't bad. There was a couple of jokes in there that I'm not going to say made me laugh, but I'm going to say there was a couple of jokes in there that almost made me laugh.
Well, you're a tough audience, Frank, even at the best of times.
You know what? I am a tough audience, and I don't like a lot of comedy. I remember one time our mutual friend Ronan just did not believe me that I was not really into comedy, and he brought me to a comedy show, and about 15 minutes into the show, he just turned to me and he said, "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave." And I was like, "What? You brought me here. You bought me the ticket. You promised me I'd enjoy it. You're asking me to leave?" And he was like, "Yeah." He was like, I can't enjoy this with you sitting there stony faced beside me."
So tell me this, right? So this is open to, there was a famous thing where you can do this already, and it is a good business where, it's a fine business where you can get a famous person, you pay them 100 quid, and they'll record like a 30-second type video for you. And famously and topically, Nigel Farage, you can do this with Nigel Farage. And there was a video where somebody paid him 100 quid and he read out whatever was he was told to read out. And at the end of it was ooh, ah, up the rah, which was kind of entertaining for an Irish person to hear Nigel Farage say that, right? So how do you stop in this type of a setup? I mean, how do you stop, let's say, Ricky Gervais saying that, he was wrong all along, and he's now suddenly, a theist and loves God? Is there going to be some sort of guardrails around it? Because it's wide open.
I know. Yeah, I know. I find all that really interesting. I mean, so because even a while back, so yes, on this tool, I wasn't able to find many details because it's so new, but it does appear as if the celebrities have licensed their likenesses and their voices. It does appear at least as if they are fully bought in. Um, but I mean, it's a really good question because how are they going to prevent somebody using it not to roast someone, but to just propagate kind of stuff that they would never say? I had the same thought when Meta rolled out their AI avatars, and like they did a weird kind of thing where they kind of tried to obfuscate it, where like it wasn't Snoop Dogg, it was Snoop Dogg playing a dungeon master from Dungeons and Dragons. So they tried to kind of, it's the celebrity, but it's not the celebrity. Therefore, if it says something, it's not the celebrity saying it, it's this other character they're playing. It's like, but you know, I guess that meta thing has been around for a while, and we haven't actually seen any stories of people, you know, we haven't seen any negative stories arising from it. So I'm not sure. I don't know how I don't know how they're going to prevent it, but I don't know how much of an issue it is either.
Did you see, right? Speaking of Meta, did you see the video this week? So it was July the 4th this week, American Independence Day. And Mark Zuckerberg released a video of him on a surfboard surfing in a suit, a full suit, right? Holding an American flag and drinking a beer, right? And it was pretty cool,
To the
right?
tune
You saw,
of "Born in the USA." Yeah,
yeah,
Bruce
yeah, it was a
Springsteen.
great video. And what a crazy time to be alive. Was that real? Do you think?
Um, I read a very interesting post. I mentioned Chris Penn in last week's episode, and I'm bringing him up again because he had a post about it, and he actually said he had a very interesting point, which was, this is the level of authenticity and complexity that is going to be required to prove that this is human content. So, you know, he looked at it and he said, there's no way that this is AI, because you can see the suit getting wet. You can see the waves, you know, you can see the water hitting him in a way that AI just can't handle the movement right now, et cetera, et cetera. And he was saying, yeah, this is the level of complexity that you need to go, this is me. It's actually me.
Yeah.
And that might be true today. I don't know how long it's going to be true for. And also, I'm going to, you know, be completely honest. If Mark Zuckerberg turned around and said, actually, wasn't me at all, this is our new video model, I also, you know, I'd be surprised, but I wouldn't be completely and utterly shocked.
It's incredible. Mark
But
Zuckerberg voice famously has a wonderful speaking voice. Did you know that?
I I did not know that. No.
Wonderful. He's got this wonderful tone. He's a bit like Micheál Mohertig, but he's American, right? Would you like to have Mark Zuckerberg read you a bedtime story?
I am not a big fan of Mark Zuckerberg's expressionless monotone, I have to admit. No,
How about
no.
Elon
I think
Musk?
if I
Elon Musk could read you the Three Little Pigs. Would you pay for that?
could Tom Waits read me my bedtime story?
He could. He could. Because this week, and I think this is fantastic, this week, 11 Labs have released a new service where you can upload any story that you want to 11 Labs and then pick a voice. And they don't have, unfortunately, Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk yet. And I'm not sure is Tom Waits there, but he will be shortly if he's not
Hmm.
already. But they do have people like Judy Garland and others, and they will read the story to you. What do you think of this from a creator's point of view?
Well, I think this ties really, really interestingly into what we were just talking about, because the voices that they have, let me think. It's like Judy Garland, James Dean, I can't remember the other two, but basically, as far as I'm aware, they're all huge, huge old Hollywood names, but they are all, none of them are living. They're all dead. So
Yeah,
none of
that's not
them,
an accident.
you know, so you can't, you know, nobody is going to be able, you know, nobody's going to use it to kind of say, oh, it's not like the Ricky Gervais or the Dave Chappelle, where it's like, oh, he just said this. You know, it's, you know, there's a very clear, well, this person is no longer living, so they obviously didn't just say this yesterday. And I wonder, is that exactly why it is these kind of four old school Hollywood types? You know, is this a concern? Because, you know, 11 Labs, has been around a while. They have they have obviously put a lot of consideration into what they do and how it can be misused, and they're reasonably conscientious for an AI company. Let's put it that way. And so I wonder, is this exactly why these are the voices that are available to you? And has this other company, the roasting app company, have they considered any of this as fully? And are they being as conscientious?
I think what 11 Labs have done here is really smart, right? I think they've done two things. One is, yes, I think it's very purposeful that they've picked, people that are famous but aren't around anymore. I mean, I think that might be a commercial decision as well. I mean, it's probably just cheaper to, license those voices, and it's less risky.
They're all huge. Like I'd say their estates, guard their IP rigorously and aggressively. So I wouldn't be so sure that they weren't expensive to obtain.
Do you think? Well, but they wouldn't be on the same scale as a Ricky Gervais, surely.
I don't know.
Do you think?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Anyway, that's the one that I would assume that Ricky Gervais charges more than Judy Garland does. But anyway, I could be wrong about that. But the second thing they do then is you upload your content. Now that's super smart, right? You can upload any content you want. And they had in their example Judy Garland reading, The Wizard of Oz, which is kind of cool, right? But it just gets around so many licensing issues, and it gets around so many, bad use, bad actor, all sorts of things. It's like, listen, you take the tool, you upload the content, we're just giving you a voice, which is of a person who's not around, so they couldn't have said it, right? So you are the person clearly who's made the person say this. It's just a wonderful way to do it. I don't know how they monetize it, properly. Like, how do they put it into everybody's hands? That will be, distribution will be tough. But just as a model, I think that's really good. It's a really beautiful, beautiful implementation. Which brings us to our last story, Frank, which isn't a beautiful implementation. A story that you brought to my attention of a drive-through place in America called Rally. Now, I thought when you had this, that they were talking about rally drivers, and it was rally drivers were going to be talked to by an AI saying hard left, over bump, 4 right. But no, that's not what was happening here. What happened here, Frank?
So this is another, and this was brought to my attention by my sister-in-law, who actually experienced this. And it's basically in a drive-through, you are now giving your order to an AI who responds to you vocally, but it's an AI voice. So, and again, this raises all those questions of like, it makes perfect sense. It's not the best job in the world. It makes perfect sense for AI to do this, again, as long as the people are being looked after. What I thought was one of the things that I thought was funny was my sister-in-law is a big fan of a drink called Ale8, which I don't think we have it here. I'd never heard of it, but she's a huge fan of it. But apparently her frustration with the AI ordering was that it cannot recognize when someone says Ale8. Now, it's a weird word. It's a weird thing to say. Say it a few times, it loses all meaning. Ale8, Ale8. So the AI has no idea what people are saying when they're trying to order Ale8s. I would love to have, because don't they film all these interactions? Like, I'd love to see these interactions, the original interactions where people were trying to order Ale8. They now have big signs up saying, if you're trying to order Ale8, the AI is not going to understand you. You have to ask for a strawberry soda.
Brilliant.
But tell me why you don't like it.
Well, again, it's just I'm down to that. I'm bald and grey enough already, Frank, and just the implementation, the voice wasn't particularly good. It was, there's so much good AI out there. They say that it's 96% accurate, which is good now, right? I do that, and I suspect the 4% is the 4% of people who are looking for Ale8. So that was the 4%. But give me Scarlett Johansson, give me Sky taking my order, and then I'll be totally happy. Then I'm going, yes, you've got it.
There's two things there, right? The first is, in a lot of the stories that we covered today, they talk about the accuracy of the AI or the robot. But what they never do in any of these stories is compare it to the accuracy of the human that would have otherwise been doing the job. So like, okay, it's 96% accurate. how accurate was a human? I would love to know. And I don't understand. I never understand why they don't give that comparison. And the second thing I was going to say was, you mentioned that the Scarlett Johansson or the Sky voice. I mean, what I find interesting about all that is that particular voice, which they ended up taking off ChatGPT because of the whole Scarlett Johansson controversy, that voice was miles better than any other voice that ChatGPT had available to it. And I would love to know why. And I would love to know, what was different about that AI voice that gave it the expressiveness that we're not getting. Like I watched that drive-through voice and I thought, yeah, it's fine. It's, it's a standard AI voice. But you're right, it's nothing like Sky, but then no other voice is, even the other OpenAI voices. I'd love to know the story behind that.
Frank, I know, and another week has passed, and we still don't have GPT-5, and we still don't have GPT-4o with interactive voice and so on. We wait. A nation holds its breath, Frank, but I'm hopeful soon, soon we will have it. Frank, again, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. Another fascinating week, and we look forward to speaking again next week.
Fantastic. I will chat to you then, and hopefully I will not have been hunted down and killed by a robot with human skin and a human brain in the meantime.
Yeah, less the human brain skin next. See ya.